Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to talk about using video for effective communication for remote teams. I'm Sid, co-founder and CEO at Gitlab, and I'm joined by Sunil. Sunil, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sunil Kaulgi, the founder and CEO of Outclip. So Outclip is a modern platform for creating and sharing screen recordings. It's used a lot by remote teams for things like bug reporting, sharing feedback, as well as making short demos for customers so they can learn faster. So it's helping reduce teams, and broadly, we're working on asynchronous video solutions for remote teams to help them collaborate more effectively.
Awesome. I'd say fire away.
Great. So yeah, to prepare questions for the interview, I browsed the GitLab handbook where you document everything your employees need to know about working at GitLab. And it's a very exhaustive document and also a great resource for other remote companies. It also posed a challenge for me to come up with new questions to ask. So I'm going to try my best not to overlap with the handbook as much. To kick things off, so GitLab is known for being a fully remote company. So I'd like to get a sense for how distributed you are. Could you tell us how many employees work at GitLab and where are they located?
Yeah, cool. If you Google GitLab team, you'll find a map, and there's now 470 people in over 50 countries. The majority of people are in the US and Europe.
And these employees are divided across different departments like engineering, marketing. So how big are these different departments?
Yeah, if you look at that page I just talked about, there's a drop down. If you click that, you can see all the different departments. Approximately like half the company is in engineering, and then sales and marketing are the other big departments.
Okay. And so what is the best part of running a remote company from your perspective?
I like that I'm very effective with my time. I don't spend a lot of time on airplanes. Like when I tell people like I'm a CEO of a growing startup and I'm on a plane once a month, mostly to go to a conference or maybe visit a customer. Most of the time I can combine going to a conference and visiting customers. They're pretty amazed. Also in your day-to-day, you can go between meetings really, really fast. It's just it's 30 seconds away instead of having to find another room, etc.
Got it. And what is the thing that you find most challenging about running a remote company?
It's, I think, interacting with the rest of the world. Like frequently when you talk with someone who's not used to remote, like they don't have a good webcam, they don't have earphones. You're perfect. Yeah, you have a good webcam, earphones, and internet connection. That's great, but it's challenging when there's like technical difficulties setting up something.
Got it. Yeah. So the theme of this conversation is really about kind of using video for effective collaboration on remote teams. So I want to start by diving into your meeting practices. So meetings are a challenge for remote teams because of time zone differences. So how do you select a good time for a meeting at GitLab?
Yeah, so you select the time with the most overlap. For us, that's 8:30 Pacific and 9 o'clock Pacific. But the problem is you can't hold your meetings then, because then we have our group conversation where there's a conversation about what part of a company is doing, and our company call, which is mostly hanging out with a fixed group of people and talking about things outside of work. Today, we talked about what imaginary fictional destination you would want to go to. And Hogwarts was really popular. So that's the most important to us, that we create those social bonds and that that everyone knows what's going on in the company. So the rest of the meetings are hard to plan. So we tend to have fewer meetings, which I think is kind of an advantage in itself. And we try to do a lot of things asynchronous by commenting on issues or working in chat.
And I imagine the work patterns are going to be different based on the kind of team, right? The deadlines and urgencies are different for product teams versus technical support. So what is the impact of working across time zones for these different teams?
Yeah, I think, for example, technical support, they have an SLA. We have a promise to customers that we respond. And I think they have what they call a response hawk, someone that's watching like all the different issues. There's all kinds of severities and levels of support we agreed with customers. So they make sure that that works. Now, automation helps there, but there's also people responsible, and they follow the clock. There's three teams in Europe, in America, and Asia. So they take over from each other. So that's going well. I also think that maybe a counter, or I think you don't think about, a lot of meetings are needed because it's not clear who's the directly responsible individual. So a lot of the work we do is making sure that most issues have a directly responsible individual who can make the choice without needing to get buy-in from other people. And that takes away a lot of meetings.
Okay. And what is how do you do these meetings? Like, what's the relative usage of video conferencing versus phone calls?
Oh, no phone calls. I hate phone calls. Yeah, it's unclear who's speaking. It's unclear. You can't see nonverbal communication. It's hard to share something. Like we use screen sharing a lot, like showing people what we're pointing at. So no, I haven't had a phone call inside GitLab in years. And when I have to do it externally, I think of it as a technical problem. Like, it's ridiculous that people do that in this day and age.
Okay. From speaking with various people, I've heard that like people working from home generally turn off their webcam during meetings. Is that common at GitLab? And
that's as common as walking into the office with a motorcycle helmet.
Okay.
So it's not common. It's not something we do. And it's like, I join calls before I dip my hair and stuff like that, and that's encouraged. And people should feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. And you mentioned that you tend to have the right level of meetings. Do you feel that do you have too many meetings, or you feel you're happy with the level at which the number of meetings that you have in GitLab?
Way fewer scheduled meetings for decision making than other companies. What we do a lot is that if you're kind of in discussing with someone, you go back and forth 2 times, like, you should hop on a video call together instead of trying to work it out over chat or asynchronously. As soon as there's a bit more interaction needed, people should hop on a video call. So we have a lot of impromptu things, and those aren't really meetings. Those are the same as just asking someone something, and it turns into a 10 or 15-minute discussion or conversation. And I think that's very healthy, and we encourage that. I think scheduled meetings for decision-making processes are not very healthy, and we try to get rid of them. Have the directly responsible individual come up with a plan, and if you disagree with the plan, you can just talk one-on-one. No need for 5 other people to listen to the 2 of you talking.
You mentioned asynchronous communication, right? So communication within remote teams tends to be largely asynchronous. So what communication tools do you use most at GitLab?
Yeah, so we use GitLab Issues, GitLab Merge Requests, Slack, and Zoom, and Google Docs.
And how useful do you do asynchronous video communication at GitLab? And what do you use it for?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we do use it. Like, for example, this morning I watched a presentation by product manager Brendan O'Leary about our Verify project. So we try to upload as much as we can. So we encourage our people to upload to like a channel called GitLab Unfiltered, and there's a lot of content there, and that's greatly increasing. Every single person in the company has access to that. They can upload to GitLab Unfiltered. Got
it. And what are some of the pros and cons of like written communication versus video asynchronous?
Yeah, so because with written communication, you can't have someone respond. It tends to be more verbose. Like, you tend to say more to make sure you answer any question the person might have. Well, if you talk, you can just wait for the person to ask you. So it tends to be more verbose, so it costs more time. It costs more time to write something than to read something. So there's a bigger burden on the sender. And if someone is getting annoyed, it's harder to spot. So there's a bigger chance of their of it going off the rails a bit, where people get annoyed with one another. So it's very important that people also meet each other in a synchronous fashion, where they can get a better understanding of the other person and build more trust between them.
And if I may ask, what's the nature of this asynchronous video communication? Are people recording their webcam, or are they doing a screen recording?
Yeah, all these things, presentations, etc. And also like recording, maybe we are now in a synchronous communication, but this will be, I might post this in the CEO channel, or we might post this as a reference in our handbook about remote work. So it's kind of both. It's synchronous for us, but it will be asynchronous for the majority of people that watch this video.
Now, GitLab has you mentioned about using the YouTube channels for posting asynchronous like videos recorded. Now, GitLab has a huge presence on YouTube. Last time I checked, you have hundreds of videos and almost 2 million views. So why is GitLab so prolific on YouTube? Why do you emphasize using YouTube so much?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's an underutilized medium. I also think it builds more of an emotional attachment than things like blog posts. Like, you can relate to people better. But the most important thing is it doesn't cost anything extra. We are having these video calls anyway. The only thing we're doing is now we're streaming into YouTube. It's a minute of setup extra, and the content is out there. So what we don't do is spend a whole lot of time thinking about, what are we going to stream to YouTube? We just have the meeting we're always having, but we just stream it. And then I think that's a big benefit. It doesn't cost you a lot extra, but it allows a lot of extra people to consume it. And I for example, I spent an hour at the gym this morning. I just bring my iPad and I watch YouTube videos. I'm not able to read blog posts. I'm on a bicycle. I don't want to read a blog post, but I am able to do YouTube. And also, people consume information differently, and at different moments they want to consume information differently. I think there's a lot of written content. I don't think there's a lot of viewable content. So I think it's a great channel to get people familiar with GitLab.
And who at GitLab is creating most of the content that goes on your YouTube channel? Are there specific roles, or is it across the board?
It should be across the board. And I think I'm right now making the most content, which is not great. But you see people like Brendan, like Victor who's done an amazing job of putting it out there. And we're just getting started. So basically every person at GitLab that has like a couple of video calls a day, there should be at least one a week that you take the effort to stream.
And aside from putting it on YouTube, do you share or promote these videos on other platforms? Like, do you share it in Slack, Twitter, etc.?
Yeah, we share them internally. We sometimes tweet about them. I think we're still discovering how we can best promote them, and sometimes maybe do a write-up of an interesting stream as a blog post. And we're still getting started there. We're not doing that a lot, and I think that's going to increase in the future.
So we're right now using Zoom to make this recording as a live stream for YouTube, and it's going to be present on YouTube afterwards. Are there any other tools that you use for video recording or screen recording?
Yeah, so actually this is live stream. So we have people in the live stream now, and the recording will be available afterwards. We love Zoom. You can also do something on YouTube where you go into a Google Hangouts, but we found that works less well. So we're kind of standardizing on Zoom for these kind of calls.
And what are some of the best practices you recommend for creating content for YouTube? What are the guidelines for GitLab employees for making videos?
Yeah, so for me, it's really important to put the bar very low to capture more of the content that is already out there. So we're not going to like place demands on you, like think about this and this and that. No, have the meetings you would have anyway, and then just hit the record button. The only thing you should be cautious about is that this is public. So for example, don't name customer names, because a customer might not like to be named out in public. And there's a few other things that are confidential. So try to avoid confidential information. And if it does happen, take the video down as soon as you can. Then that's basically the only rule we have.
And what are some of the apart from live streaming, what are some of the video related features that you use? Things like annotating videos, editing them. Do you do much editing of videos that you post on your YouTube?
Right now, not. Maybe as we get better, we can have more production. But right now, not. It's very time consuming. And as I said, it should be only a minute extra work, not hours. The only thing I really enjoy using is virtual backgrounds. So here you see a picture of our team in Cape Town, but in reality, I'm sitting in a spare bedroom at my house with a green screen behind me.
And what are some of, if you can share some of the pain points in making and sharing videos and screen recordings? Any particular thing that you wish were done better?
Just sharing that background now and changing it to something that's also fun. Yeah, I think the pain point is have a good mic, have a good microphone. This is a super nice podcasting microphone on a boom. That's very important. Have earphones. Like no one wants to listen to your echo. So make sure you have that. These ones are in our handbook, super lightweight. I wear them about 10 hours a day. So I want open earphones, not closed ones. And the rest speaks for itself. Have a good internet connection, have a reliable computer.
You mentioned that you take down confidential videos. So how do you end up sharing those confidential videos internally at GitLab?
Yeah, we put them as private videos, but since everyone has an account on GitLab and filtered, they can all access them.
Okay. Getting to some of the use cases of like why you make videos. So I've seen on GitLab's YouTube that you have a virtual town hall with new hires. So what are your reasons for doing that? They call it executive communication. So just want to know your reasons for recording and putting it on YouTube.
Yeah, so it's a CEO 101 call, and new hires ask questions, like stuff that they couldn't find in the handbook, or they looked for it. It might be there, but they don't know. And the reason for recording it, we also have a lot of people that are considering joining GitLab, haven't quite joined, and might have the same questions. So we want that content to be out there.
Want to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk about more outside-facing things. So this is about GitLab's customers. So where are GitLab's customers mostly located?
So they're all over the world. I think more than 180 countries, but I'm not quite sure. But a majority of them are in the US and in Europe.
And what are your kind of most common ways of supporting your customers, given that you're a remote team and your customers are probably not in the same geo as the support person?
Well, we try very hard to make sure that our support people are at least time zone-wise aligned with the incoming requests. So not necessarily in the same region as the customer, but that they can have a normal day rhythm and that they receive those requests in a normal time of the day for them. So we do have support teams in Europe, in EMEA, and in Asia to make that happen.
And how do you train your customers to use your products? What are the different modes of training?
Yeah. So first of all is, of course, the product shouldn't require training if at all possible. So we got a UX team, we got a UX resources within that UX team to make it as intuitive as possible and as easy to install as possible. But apart from that, there's a lot of documentation. But there's also technical account managers and solution architects that help answer questions. A lot of those questions are like, how do we change from our old systems to GitLab? What do we need to do for that? How do we get the data in there? And how do we change our culture and maybe even our hiring criteria to adopt and embrace DevOps?
And do you use video for customer training or support?
Yes, we regularly do webinars. We also sometimes come on site, but webinars are an important part of that too.
Okay. Now I want to talk about team collaboration. So on a remote team, you're no longer able to tap on someone's shoulder and when you want to give them feedback on their work. So what are the different ways in which you give feedback within GitLab and someone's not available online, so you can't have that call, but you need to share something with them at that instant?
Yeah, so different ways. We use chat, try to give negative feedback in private and public feedback in a thank you channel, so the whole company can see the positive feedback. Many times the artifact that we're discussing is a merge request. We merge requests not only for like our code, but also changes to our handbook and our processes. So you can leave feedback on those, or it's in an issue. You can leave feedback on the issue itself, or it's in a Google Doc. You can leave feedback and comments in that thing as well. Also, managers are expected to have one-on-ones with their reports. I have a weekly one-on-one with all my reports. So I put a lot of feedback on those agendas. It actually has a special section called feedback.
And do you at times resort to video feedback?
I think most of the time I try to do it in a video call. So I put it on that agenda, but we discuss it during the call. And I think like feedback is hard. It's hard to give. It's even harder to receive. So it's much better to do in an environment where you can see someone is distraught by what you're saying, or they don't understand, or they don't agree, that they're able to respond. It feels really powerless if someone gives you negative feedback and you're not able to ask an additional question, or you think there's misunderstanding, or you're like, well, how important is this? So I think I prefer to do it if it's serious in a video call.
Next, I want to talk about kind of bug reporting, right? So, I mean, you're a software company, and there's practices around reporting bugs, testing, reporting bugs. So the question is, like, how do you test your software? Who files the bug report? And what are some of the tools and practices around bug reporting?
Yeah, so there's a lot of testing going on at GitLab. We have an entire team, the quality team, that helps us to refactor those test sets. And those are unit tests, integration tests. We even have like system tests called GitLab QA. So as soon as you propose a commit to be added to GitLab, we spin up over 100 computers to test the code to make sure that everything is still working. So it's quite a big test set. And there's a lot of people in the company involved to make sure that happens reliably and fast, and that it catches the things you want to catch.
And do you also have manual software quality testing?
Less and less. I think we're almost done. Like the last thing was kind of GitLab QA, which was very like piecing all those different parts of GitLab together and then doing some smoke testing. But I think that's now all completely automated. You want to avoid manual testing because you cannot repeat it. So if you repeat it less, then you're going to find bugs, but you're not quite sure where they were introduced, and it's harder to track them down.
That's the steps to reproduce for a bug are often the most key to fixing the bug, because if you're not able to reproduce it, you can't fix it. Have you considered like using videos, and have they been effective for you in terms of documenting the steps to reproduce a bug?
We try and we strive to automate the reproduction steps. So many bugs that we find, the solve is a one-liner, but there's like 100 lines of extra tests being added to catch the bug.
Now, kind of talking about how the tribal knowledge is stored and persisted within GitLab. So storing and spreading tribal knowledge is a challenge for companies as it is. I imagine it's more difficult for as a remote team. So what are some of the practices that have helped in maintaining a knowledge base at GitLab? Yeah,
I think that this is one of the most essential things for any company. And I think are much better at it than other companies because we write things down. We more than double every year. So at the end of the year, most of the people are new. So just telling each other would greatly dilute it. And one thing we're still struggling with is, for example, the tribal knowledge of support. How do we make sure that's captured? And we wanted to capture that in the GitLab documentation. So we're giving more access to support to add things to the documentation and try to make sure that whatever they advise customers is also reflected in our documentation, because that's the only way you can kind of allow people to self-serve and have a single source of truth for what people should do. But that means that there's more like informal advice in the documentation. And it took some convincing to make our documentation team comfortable with that. And we're still rolling it out. I can't declare success yet, but that's one of the ways we try to do that. But also, for example, people have nicknames. My co-founder is called DZ. We capture those nicknames on our team page. It's really important. If someone has a nickname, that is actually on the team page. So if someone talking about them, you can actually look in that page and find them.
So you mentioned there's always a difficulty in getting people to document kind of tribal knowledge. So what do you think will help to get more people to contribute to the knowledge base? I mean, it's one thing to have the policy to kind of document everything, but what kind of changes in tooling or culture is going to help promote storing things in a knowledge base?
So a few things. So first of all, we decided on making a special troubleshooting section that can be added to any documentation page, which is kind of a free-for-all, where people can add things with a very low bar. Then the second thing was making sure that all the support engineering managers could merge things into the documentation. So as you make an addition, your manager can quickly get that in. And last but certainly not least, we're going to measure the emails that went out and see whether they have a custom answer or they refer to a piece in our documentation and reference that.
Okay. Next, I want to ask you about the kind of usage of mobile phones, right? So, I mean, a lot of the work obviously happens on a PC in front of a computer. How much of your work happens on a mobile? What do you use it? What do you do? What kind of work do you do on your phone?
Yeah, I use Slack a lot on my mobile. I find it very frustrating that somehow if I go from Slack to any application, I'm never signed into that application. I'm not sure why that is. Is that because I use Chrome or something? I don't know. I also do Zoom meetings when I'm out and about and I need to do a meeting. I'll do them via Zoom or an iPad. And I've started to use an iPad a lot more in the last year. I love that. I love being able to sit in a taxi. I have one with LTE and you can just continue your work. I think that's a great thing.
Do GitLab employees make videos on their phones? And when do they do it? And why do they do that?
Yeah, we try to do that. Like if you're having a in-person conversation, just whip out a phone and record the conversation. I think I still stimulate people to do it, but it's not happening often. I think it's awkward to do. It's not normal, so people tend to not do it. It's also hard to get the video and the audio right. Like the video, you have two people speaking, so you're kind of switching between them or something. So that's not ideal. The audio tends to be bad. So that's where we have a big advantage as a remote company. We're in video calls. We get a camera on each speaker. The view switches between the speakers. We got headphones. We got good microphones. So I think that because we're remote and we're in video calls a lot, we have this like gold mine of content we can produce. So I'm trying to focus on that instead of trying to do it in person.
You mentioned you have all this a gold mine of content that you post on YouTube. I mean, do you have any practices around making them easy to search and find?
No. Right now, I'm just focused on quantity, and then quality, distribution, editing, promotion, reformatting, writing a blog post out of it. That's all going to come. I think like first, let's open up the floodgates and then let's start picking through it. And it's not gold, it's gold dirt at that point, but I'm sure we'll be able to get some gold out of that.
And any use cases that you have come across for like mobile screen sharing? People need to show what's on their mobile screen.
Oh yeah, I think it's very hard. I think you kind of want to do it. I was in a WhatsApp call with my sister just this morning, and I want to share a photo. And like, I'm in a WhatsApp video call. What's more normal for me to kind of share my screen and show a photo of my cat? But I couldn't. I had to like leave the video call. She doesn't get video anymore, and then go to my pictures and then share them via WhatsApp, forcing her to leave the app and do that. So I think it's kind of the next gen in video calling where you're able to do screen sharing. I think on computers, it's already really good. I love how you can share a presentation or Google Doc via Zoom. You can see the cursors and everything. I'm just hoping it will get to mobile too.
I have a last couple of questions about the future of remote work. So first off, do you have a wish list of features for kind of asynchronous video sharing creation that could really help GitLab?
So I'm not sure it answers your question, but one thing we're really missing is the ability to live stream without a lot of hassle. We can do this live on YouTube, but we both have to kind of be promoted to panelists. So I wish you could have a link where anybody in the call was a panelist by default. Also just setting kind of the title of the YouTube stream and the permission level and the channel in advance. So the people organizing the call can do that. So you don't have to be in the call and do that would be helpful. It's hard for people on YouTube now to interact with us. We would have to look in the YouTube chat. It's inconvenient. It starts streaming and then the audio starts. Like, I want kind of an integrated chat system there. So just some things to make streaming itself easier to do.
A more general question, this is my final question. So what do you think will make remote work easier as we go forward?
I think internet connections are just getting better. I think that's the most important thing. Also, the tools that you need, the webcams, the microphones are getting cheaper and more accessible. So I think that's driving it. And then, of course, what's happening is that it's getting more common. When we got out of Y Combinator, it was like, oh, remote, that doesn't really work, etc. But with companies like InVision, like us, like Zapier, doing really good, people are opening up to it. And I think it's getting more and more common. I think it's also more common to have business meetings in a video call. So as that gets more common, I think there's going to be a lot of remote companies with a lot of benefits for the people at companies that have more flexibility in their time and need to work less hours, but also for the environment and most of all for the spread of wealth across the planet.
Excellent. So that concludes kind of all the questions that I have. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and with the rest of the audience. It was really a pleasure to do this interview with you.
It was the pleasure was all mine. Great questions. I enjoyed it a lot, and thanks so much.